I've yet to meet a politician, I've yet to meet a leader who wants to do the right thing for the sake of doing the right thing.
What do we want?
Permanent housing for the homeless!
When?
Now!
What do we want?
Permanent housing for the homeless!
When?
Now!
You have the floor.
Good evening, Mayor, Council members. My name is Larry Haynes. I'm the Executive Director of Mercy House. I'm here to talk about, obviously, the supportive housing project for our city's homeless. I want to start by saying I know that everyone in the community cares about our homeless. We've spent a lot of time as a city staff, and I want to commend the city staff and council's leadership on coming up with a wide variety of strategies to try and end Costa Mesa homelessness. On a moment's notice, we had, 50, 60 people outside council chambers. I'm sure you heard rather loudly chanting. I didn't organize that, but I do want to say thank you to everyone who came out, because I think what it demonstrates is, on a moment's notice, very strong support in this city to end Costa Mesa's homelessness. I also think we can work together to find some solutions. I think that's what we must do. I don't believe that anybody wants to see someone continue to be homeless forever and ever. I also think, however, if I may, any credible response to homelessness must include housing. Without so, it's not a credible response. In order for housing to be both financially and socially viable, it has to be somewhat near amenities, transportation lines, grocery stores, etc. And in doing so, that does mean that there are always going to be someone somewhere who is unhappy with a location. That is absolutely unavoidable. So therefore, what that also means is that from a leadership perspective, at some point, if we are going to address this, we are going to have to be able to withstand some public dissent. Having said that, I am absolutely convinced that we can all work together to figure out a way to make this happen. And I would encourage everyone to come to the community service meeting next week and let's solve this together. But please, let's not walk away. There is no credible answer to homelessness without a housing solution. Thank you.
In 2010, my mom and I were driving home. I was in 7th grade at the time. On that particular drive home, my mother and I noticed what seemed to be the increasing number of homeless around our home in Huntington Beach. That was the moment we started looking for the cure. In 2010, we had begun to hear about a man named Dr. Ed Clark and how he was enumerating the homeless with students and coming up with reasonable numbers. Before my first round of high school finals, we finally met with Dr. Clark. Prior to meeting with him, I thought homelessness was something we couldn't solve or fully comprehend. While this may be true for certain situations, I'm about to tell you the story of how the people of Costa Mesa came together as a community to equip and empower those without a home to end their homelessness. What is homelessness? Is it nowhere to live? Is it just mental illness? Is it the idea of a bum, drunk, transient? Or is it a lack of self-sufficiency? Or self-respect? Or is it many more things that we have yet to consider? What is homelessness not? It's not jobless, it's not disease, it's not easy to overcome, it's not always a choice, it's not always visible, it's not always simple or permanent. Or something that defines an identity for that matter. How does it happen? You run out of money, your job, your benefits, medical insurance, abandonment from family, addictions, mental illness, trauma, the foster care and prison release, domestic violence, divorce, choice. This and many more things.
Our hope is that we create a model with all the right pieces together that can be exported. The very foundation of my knowledge is experience of, poor, My dad was a pastor, grew up in the 50s, early 60s, and I got a sense of what it was like to have little. And I think God shaped my heart in that direction, and that's where I look to make a difference. That's where I want to go with my academic skills. My homeless work specifically started in 2007, and it was with a question by Larry Haynes, who is the head of Mercy House Incorporated. And he asked me what could he do to ensure that his organization continued going the direction that he had set out for the organization. Then he invited me to the emergency shelters. Later that year, I did my first homeless enumeration with students, training them how to do a census. And that's where it started. Out of that, I presented to a group of churches and met Bex Hayhoe. She came and visited me after she found out about the surveys that we were doing. So she's at Rock Harbor now, and she is the center for what they have called the Church Consortium for Costa Mesa.
I moved to America 3.5 years ago to get involved with a local church called Soul Survivor and to just get stuck in kind of helping with homelessness. But my heart for the homeless really stems back just from experiences in life that I've had of God doing a great work of restoration and redemption in my own life and in my story. So I studied at seminary in the UK, and then just through God doing this work of restoration in my life, He really broke my heart for people who were on the outskirts of society. And eventually that led to a job working for a homeless nonprofit, and I just loved it. And I ended up specializing in our Eastern European immigrants and our mental health clients, and sometimes that would cross over, which was interesting to navigate. And that's really how God broke my heart for the homeless and for those who are experiencing living life outside. How I ended up in America is another kind of strange story. I came out here on vacation in 2008 and spent 5 weeks traveling around different parts of the States and ended up in Costa Mesa. And really remember on the first day I was here, sitting outside on 21st Street and journaling and saying, Lord, I want to come back here for longer. This place feels like home. I don't know why, and I don't know what I would do. And it has to be more than just sunbathing and eating Mexican food. And during the time that I was here, conversations with John and his wife, there were things going on with the church. There were things that I actually had some experience in. They were just in need of some support. And one of the pieces was that homeless people were coming to the church and they weren't too sure kind of what to do with them. So I just sat and listened and internally smiled and wondered. Went back to the UK, spoke to all my spiritual advisors, the pastors at my church, and said, I think God might be calling me to go out and to just serve this church for a while. What do you guys think? And they said, we think you should pursue it. So I did. I emailed them, said, hey, these are the things that I have training in, experience in. Do you think this could be of use? And so they wrote back and said, yeah, we think God's in this. 9 months later, I was on a plane. I'd sold pretty much everything that I owned. I'd given up my job. I'd left where I was living, put a couple of boxes in storage at my aunt and uncle's house, and I landed in California.
So she came and visited me with me here in the office. She had been working with homeless in London. And we decided that what we had to do is try to find out what churches were contributing to the homeless stuff, and then to get all those churches together and see if we could better manage the resources, because a lot of redundancy was happening. So they all got together one night, and Bex asked me if I would come and present to them, and I did. And they created a church consortium.
The consortium really came about twofold. One, I believe with all my heart that God's doing something really unique in Costa Mesa, and the consortium's just a byproduct of that. And then the other is out of a cry from the city of Costa Mesa. So back in 2010, 2011, homelessness was the thing that people in the city were upset about. There was a lot of talk about it at city council meetings, at Parks and Rec meetings, and the city wanted to do something to address homelessness. Aside from that, the Christians in this town had started to really cross paths and had started to kind of get more integrated together. and just wondering what God might have in store. And so then in January of 2011, I was actually at a meeting with a lady at City Hall, Muriel Ullman, who's the housing consultant. And her and I just dreamt for about 2 hours as to what it could look like if the churches and the city worked together, and how we might be able to really strategically address homelessness in partnership. And that was the same day, in God's perfect timing, that the City Council would vote on whether or not to create a homeless task force. So I came back that night, I went to the City Council meeting, first time in my life, had no idea what I was doing. So I walked in. When the homeless task force came up on the agenda, I stood up during public comments and I spoke and said that the churches were for the creation of this homeless task force, and that together we could do more than we could separately, and that we urged the City Council to vote yes. They voted yes to creating the homeless task force. And afterwards, Tom Hatch, who's our city CEO, he came bouncing over to me and said, "We really want to have you on the homeless task force, and we haven't had anybody who speaks the language of both the city and the churches, and we recognize that without the churches we're going to fail at this." And so he really laid out this job description for me, which I did not expect, did not see coming, but stepped into, and we've been figuring it out as we go along.
Originally, when we started on this sort of mission, this quest to end Costa Mesa's chronic homelessness, I had met with the city CEO and a couple of other key staff members, friends with Dr. Ed Clark. So we wanted to enumerate, we wanted to identify, and the key to all this, of course, is permanent housing. City staff thought that was a great idea. But the next thing I knew is that we went from a room of about 4 or 5 people to the construct of about, I don't know, a 20 or 22 person committee called the Costa Mesa Homeless Task Force. Now, in the middle of all that, this is my memory. My memory was the idea was presented at a council meeting, and I was sitting where I usually sit, kind of in the back and off to one side. And I don't know if I spoke, if somehow this idea, what we were going to do, was being presented. But during some break, I'm standing up and I see this person bounding from around the corner, and basically, bam, "Hi, I'm Bex Hayhoe. We need to meet." And I'm thinking, all right, I kind of think we are right now. It was from that where, where we met and we talked, and ever since then, I have not had a more reliable partner than Bex, as well as a consortium, and what we are all trying to do in Costa Mesa.
While attending a consortium function, I was introduced to housing consultant Muriel Ullman, who was hired out of the city of Costa Mesa's growing concern for homelessness.
The people that really created the task force or asked the city council to create it were those that felt that we needed a comprehensive strategy to address homelessness. I believe that some of them thought that criminalizing homelessness and maybe mobilizing our police force would be a way to do that in a more comprehensive way. Ironically, the way things turned out, when the task force was formed, it was actually made up not only of people from public safety, but it was made up of business people, residents, churches, and nonprofits. And by the end of the 11 months that we met, it became very clear that homelessness was due to many, many factors, and we really needed an integrated approach, not just a policing approach, to truly address the issue.
I then met Ian Stevenson, who founded the Trellis organization, which empowers churches in Costa Mesa to strategically come together around critical issues in their city.
In 2011, the city decided to do a study on homelessness, and they wanted the church's involvement in that. So as a result of the church's involvement, the consortium was started. The church's consortium dealing with homelessness. What was happening prior to all this was each church was doing their own little thing with homelessness, doing a feeding thing here and a handout here, and there was a lot of things being done, but nothing really strategically to address the issue of homelessness. And all these little things that were being done were actually causing more problems in the city regarding homelessness than really helping.
They worked with Vanguard University. They did what they call U-Count, which was a census taken to find out how many chronic homeless are really in Costa Mesa at any one time, and what is the true nature of the problem so that we could address it more comprehensively. You need to know what your problems are before you can really address them. I really credit the U-Count people in the consortium for bringing that to the city's attention so that we have a better strategy.
In 2011, when the city did this task force, and there was actually a study done and people really diving in, it helped pull the churches together around an issue that they cared about, and they started to see ways that we could actually do things that would really make a strategic difference as it pertains to homelessness. The city let us know that what we were doing was not helping, and that the churches needed to come together on this. They needed to stop doing their own thing. So honestly, the city kind of woke us up a little bit to the need for all this.
Dr. Clark's survey of the homeless population was presented to the Costa Mesa City Council and was then replicated the following year. After multiple surveys, they have found that the Costa Mesa homeless population is a stable number around 120 people. Upon this finding, the city of Costa Mesa promised that they would provide funding for permanent supportive housing if the churches stopped feeding the homeless in the parks.
So from there, the cry was to rally the churches together. We set about inviting about 53 churches. 16 showed up, and there we just launched the vision for what it could look like to work together. A very simple vision, but that came out of response to the fact that the city was creating this task force and that we'd been invited to participate. And in order to participate well, we needed to get organized. And then we went on this crazy journey together of looking at what we were already doing and asking really tough questions about why we were doing it. Did we do it because we'd always done it? Or were we doing these things because they met real needs among the community? And that's when our paths really crossed with Vanguard, and in particular Professor Ed Clark. And we began to wonder what it would look like to use the sociological tools that he had access to and can create to really find out what the needs were among those experiencing homelessness here. In 2012, we started some of our programs. So between 2011 and 2012, the churches that were involved sent representatives to come to monthly meetings. And so I would liaise between that group and between the city's homeless task force. So we mix and mingle in a lot of different circles because we believe that God's voice of hope and restoration is for everybody. While yes, our primary purpose is to whisper hope to those who are living outside, we also get the chance to do that with everybody else that we work with too. And so our goal is that we would mobilize Christ followers so that those experiencing homelessness can be equipped and empowered to end their own homelessness by establishing a healthy home for themselves. So it's really important that we have community with them. It's really important that they know that we are for them, and that the things that we do are motivated out of our love for them and our desire to see their lives be all that they can be.
When I learned the consortium helps the homeless by being in community with them to empower their decision to end their own homelessness, I asked Bex if there was anyone in particular who oversaw the consortium's outreach functions. She then introduced me to Consortium Outreach Director, Crystal Clark.
Myself and a team of trained people go to places that are providing daily resources such as food, medical attention, as well as going out onto the streets and kind of how you would build relationships in your everyday life, going out and just talking to people, striking up conversation, and getting to know them better and confirming that they are actually experiencing homelessness through listening to their story. It's not something that's done in a day. It's something that's done over time, seeing the same person, listening and talking with them, much like you would someone that you've met at an office or out in your everyday. We'll go out and we'll talk with people. We'll ask them how their day is. We're listening to where they've come from, what's happening in their life right now, what their hurdles are, and where they would like to go in their life. I think the most important thing that I have learned since I've been trying to support people experiencing homelessness is that there are temporary solutions that meet immediate needs for the day. But in order to really help someone to end their homelessness, bigger issues need to be addressed. So it's really important to, first of all, build a relationship, let them know that you care. And then also to understand what went wrong, what happened, what choices did they make, and where would they really hope to go. And through long-term, permanent solution, then the quality of life can be improved, homelessness can end. It's much different than meeting a need for a day. It's an ongoing process of growth and development that is supported through relationship. I think that the most important thing is that there's a lot of people involved with a lot of skill and a lot of resources that are passionate and called to do this work.
After hearing that there are many people in Costa Mesa who stepped into a relationship with homeless people, my dad told me about a family friend and entrepreneur who blogged about his friendship with a gentleman experiencing homelessness around the corner from his house. His name is Dave Rosenthal.
About a year ago, I felt called to spend time with our friends on the street, the homeless in Costa Mesa and in cities around Costa Mesa. I think the thing that's drawn me to do this and to spend time with the homeless is the realization that there's not really that much that separates me or us from them, and that the difference between where they are and where I think I am is really, really razor thin. So that, in the back of my mind, is a constant theme, the idea that really there isn't that much that separates us from our friends on the street and the plight that they face on a daily basis. So as I was spending time with the folks on the street, there was one gentleman in particular, his name is Dave as well, that I started spending a lot of time with. I initially met him at a Target right around the corner from my house and spent probably 20 or 30 minutes with him in the first encounter. I was just so touched by his story, his affect, the way he conducted himself, and the things that he told me in those first 20, 30 minutes that I decided I wanted to spend more time with him and I wanted to invest in that friendship and in that relationship. And over the course of the past 12 months or so, our friendship has deepened. Unfortunately, he is still on the streets. We have tried, and I am trying to help him take those next steps. The story of Dave and my life and how it has intertwined has really been about just trying to understand him and how he got to where he's at, the things that he faces on a daily basis, the need to eat, things that we all take for granted are things that are really important for him, and trying to help him understand what he can do, what the steps are that he can take, and just try to be a vessel for channeling the services and channeling the love that is out there for this community that what I have come to realize is something that they don't feel in some cases. Dave, has mentioned to me that, I feel less than human. But through the interactions that I've had with him and through the stories that I've gathered that I've been able to blog about and share with people, Dave has been able to see that there is love and that there are people out there that care about him. And I've been able to watch as that's impacted his life and really make a difference in how he thinks about the situation that he presently finds himself in, which I think is temporary. Hopefully it is something that he'll be able to work through.
We are not about trying to tell people what's wrong with their lives or tell people how to fix their lives or trying to fix people's lives at all. We are really about coming alongside people. We're really about being people who just whisper hope and the possibility of restoration of life, which means that we want to see people be empowered to bring about changes that they want to bring about in their life, not that anybody is dictating that to people.
The simple things that these people call help. The last question on the interview, it's an open-ended question, and it simply says, if somebody came to you wanting to help, to make a difference in your life, how would you, what would you tell them to do? And they want safe space. They want some place to be clean. They want a place to store their stuff. These little things.
And so one of the great successes was that rather than having people just hand out sandwiches in the park and have lunch with their friends, the homeless friends in the park, we tried to get them to take their efforts elsewhere. Number one, maybe feed the homeless on their church campuses, help us do outreach in the streets to get people, move people out of homelessness, not just feeding them. Really working together for that goal versus, having an adversarial relationship where we were trying to get people to have get permits for lunches and insurance while they were feeding them. One of the other big successes we had, probably one of the biggest, was the homeless people have nowhere to store their belongings, so where would they store them? In a public park. So we had luggage, suitcases, bicycles all over the park. We got a lot of complaints from residents saying they didn't want to go there, they were finding needles in the park, they were being harassed supposedly by the homeless people there. So what the Churches Consortium did was they created what they call a check-in center at the Crossing Church. And what they did is they created a storage area and kind of a place for the homeless people to check in and store their items in the morning and the evening. It's a good place to offer a little counseling, a little outreach help. It also really pleases the citizens, the residents, and the city officials that a lot of that luggage and stuff that was sitting in the park is now moved out to a place that's more appropriate.
The check-in center provides 2 portable shower facilities and a portable washer and dryer service that can be taken to various locations, which allows our friends experiencing homelessness to be clean. I visited Bex one early Wednesday morning at the check-in center where she gave me a tour of the storage facilities. She explained to me that the check-in center works much like a library in that once someone has a bin in a bag, they must renew once a week. Right now, they're able to store 63 people's belongings in the facility, giving approximately 48 gallons per person. An eye-opening thing for me as I experienced the check-in center was the kindness of those without a home. That my previous perceptions of the homeless community stemmed from public concern that was not based on fact or hands-on experience. I then asked Bex if she could ask a check-in center frequent for their opinion on the services the consortium was providing them at the check-in center.
The biggest benefit is that I can now have clean clothes available at all times, which many people appreciate. Before, all the clothes I had was what I could carry in my back. One of the good things is it's forming a stronger community among the homeless, who at many times just went their own separate ways. But we get together here twice a day, share food, share stories, and then yell at each other.
Do you want to tell the story about the coffee pot? You get to tell it.
Well, the story with the coffee was, everybody saying it would be nice if we had hot coffee. And Bex, in her wisdom, decided we were going to have to buy a coffee pot ourselves. And we did. Then we got another coffee pot. Then we got a toaster oven and a microwave. And still no Slurpee machine will she let us have. So anybody watching this should email Bex Hale and tell her the benefits of Slurpees. And a mini fridge. This can only get bigger and better if we have more volunteers, because there are plenty of homeless who can use these services here.
After my 6 a.m. visit on Wednesday, I went to the check-in center on Saturday to see the breakfast that is held with the homeless community. The MC of that event is Andrew Del Rey, who goes to Rock Harbor Church and sits on the board of a nonprofit that funds the event. Mr. Del Rey proceeded to give me a tour and tell me the story behind the breakfast at the check-in center. He said it was the dream of Cindy and Jan Ross to encounter the homeless community in a real way, and to provide services that are usually out of reach to them, like washers and dryers and showers.
One of the areas that we compromised on was helping our homeless residents. So people always say to me, how is a homeless person really a resident? How do you know they belong to Costa Mesa? Were they brought up here? Did they go to school here? Did they live here? Have the police known them for several years? That is a Costa Mesa resident. So we were able to work with a lot of the churches, the Lighthouse, the Crossing, Rock Harbor, and saying, hey, if you guys do programs with us and we partner together, we'd like you to reach out to our homeless versus bringing more homeless into our city. And that's been a pretty good partnership.
I like that the check-in center requires people to be an ongoing responsibility of checking in once a week, being a part of something, and then while they're there, having social interaction, building relationship in a place that's always there with people that care long term.
We have had success on all sorts of levels, and that's been kind of the fun of it. So we've seen homelessness end through a street outreach team, the check-in center on Saturdays. For example, the check-in center in our first year, we had 154 people use the check-in center. 15 of those are no longer homeless. We've also seen huge successes in relationships between churches. churches now working together on these issues rather than being siloed. Change in attitude around homelessness among the churches, huge change in our relationship with the city of Costa Mesa. Before 2011, the churches were seen as a huge issue here, a huge problem, and seen as really making homelessness worse in the city. We're not seen as that anymore. We're seen as a good partner. We're invited to sit on various task forces and invited to provide input that's taken seriously because we've got credibility and a good reputation of working well with others, and that's huge.
It's helped the people in our churches have a more clear understanding of what it really means to help people, and that helping is not just about handouts, but it's really about relationship and engaging with people in a way that really helps empower them and lift them up.
I think without it, there would be no hub for all of us to come together and create solutions such as housing, check-in centers, further relationship building to address solutions more than just for a day.
I think that as believers and as a church as a whole, the capital C, not just the church that you or I happen to attend, we really are called to do this type of work. And I think that seeing the churches and the church consortium come alongside what the city, what the state is doing to try to take proactive steps in finding a remedy, I think is a very good thing. I think that the responsibility does fall on us as citizens to do as much as we can. And I also think that there's responsibility that the city has towards this issue. And so watching the city and what the task force has been able to do is really encouraging. I commend everyone who's been involved in moving this forward, because I do believe that the goal of eradicating homelessness in Costa Mesa is a worthy cause. I do think that it is going to be difficult to achieve, but it is certainly possible. The only way, though, that I think it will be possible is if both city and government and we as the people, you and me, actually do something about this and don't just leave it to the city and say, hey, you know what, somebody's going to take care of it, or you know what, it's not my problem, it happened somewhere else. I really think that the line that separates you and the line that separates me from where our friends on the street are right now is much thinner than certainly I think about on a daily basis, and maybe the same is true for you.
I think the city thought that homelessness was a criminal issue, something that could be solved by our police force and our firemen. They just basically felt if people were lingering in the park, they should be moved on. It took a long time to kind of change that view, and I think our working with the church, reaching out to the churches and different agencies really helped address the real root issues.
One of my great disappointments, and it's almost a source of shame for me as an advocate, as a Christian and as an advocate, is, and I teach my students this unfortunately, I almost never make a faith-based or altruistic argument to serve the poor, even when I'm talking to fellow Christians. And the reason is because most people don't care. For most people, their faith is not authentic. For most people, their faith gets them into the right club, gets them associated with successful people, especially here in Orange County. It really upsets me. It really upsets me. In my opinion, I walk away from an experience of the Jesus, the Christ that I meet in the gospel would transform the world, would save the world, and we've turned him into a freaking cartoon character. We've turned him into a glorified fat Santa Claus. And it angers me. And so I look at the majority of so-called faithful people, especially in Orange County, and we don't worship the same God, them and I. We don't understand the same things. The faith that they prescribe is my individual fire insurance from hell. The faith that they prescribe to, frankly, is just this short of the prosperity gospel, which all of us recognize as heresy. Commitment to Christ has nothing to do with my personal happiness and well-being. Nothing. It has everything to do with saving a community. I mean, my God, has no one read their Bible? Anyone? It's crazy what we are prescribing here. So because of that, it is nearly impossible for me to make a moral or theologically based argument to serve the poor, even in front of Christians. Now, from my perspective, you have no authentic relationship to Christ if you are not actively engaged in the liberation of oppressed peoples. You're not. I don't care what your doctrine is. I don't care what you mouth on Sunday. I don't care how many times you've said the Lord's Prayer. I don't care how many Our Fathers you've recited. If you are not actively engaged in meeting the needs of the poor and the vulnerable, your faith to me is worthless and frankly, wildly inconsistent with the majority of Scripture. So how then do we persuade folks? If we can't make a moral argument, how in God's name do we do it then? Self-interest. And it disgusts me. I feel like a whore. I feel like an absolute whore. I've yet to meet a politician, I've yet to meet a leader who wants to do the right thing for the sake of doing the right thing. It is a humiliating betrayal of my faith that I have to appeal to self-interest to get this done. Because I think this mindless, blind pursuit of self-interest is the exact thing that is ruining our world. I think it is the exact thing that I can't think of anything more contrary to my Christian faith or an authentic Christian faith. And so to indulge in it leaves me feeling incredibly dirty. Having said all of that, the way to move council is in fact to make the practical argument. And the truth of the matter is, it is more expensive to do nothing for the chronically homeless, just to let them live out there, than to simply build the housing and give them everything they need to end their homelessness. Study after study has been shown in the country that when a person is homeless, what do? They usually end up using emergency hospital rooms as shelter to take care of needs. And they'll even contrive illnesses to get out of the cold or to get a decent night's sleep or to get a decent meal. That's really expensive. Or they engage in behavior that drives police activity. Police cost cities a lot of money. Or things will happen to them that involves paramedics and fire and on and on and on, not even calculating the cost of declining property values or lost business opportunities. The cost of just allowing someone to live and die on the street is really irrational. It doesn't make any sense. It costs more to let them live like that than to simply put them in housing. It is cheaper to actually build the housing and subsidize it for the rest of their lives, or to take them and pay for housing in an existing apartment for the rest of their lives, than it is to simply do nothing. I have very little faith, very little hope that we're going to, from a humanistic perspective, persuade people to do the right thing. I just haven't seen it in my 25 years. What I think we can do is present a self-interested base argument that shows it is cheaper and better for communities to address their homelessness. The most self-interested, rational thing to do is to create permanent housing solutions for those that are living on the streets. And there are numerous studies throughout the country that prove that. It just makes me sick to my stomach that that's the argument that I have to make. It makes me sick to my stomach that as a decent human being, we wouldn't want to do that anyway.
We really believe that homelessness can be ended in Costa Mesa as long as the churches and the city and the community can work together. We really believe that in the next 4 to 5 years, homelessness would be just a tiny little blip in Costa Mesa, because there would be structures in place where homeless neighbors can have relationships that would really help empower them and lift them up out of their homeless scenario and help them establish a place where they have a roof over their head and they have the support around them that they need in order to thrive. The whole idea of churches coming together and working together around some of the bigger issues in the city, we really believe it's Jesus' idea. You know, in John 17, Jesus was praying in the garden right before he went to be crucified. And he was praying, Father, help them to become one. He says, help them to experience such perfect unity that the world will know that you love them as much as you love me. And I really believe that as the consortium is demonstrating that kind of unity, that kind of love, in order that our homeless neighbors are knowing that they're loved. And it's not by one church, it's by the church.
The whole reason I decided to ask that question, that open-ended question, what does help look like to you, was because we get locked into our own conceptions of what help looks like. And then we just go about distributing it. But maybe it's not as helpful as we thought it was. Maybe we need to check.
This is one thing that I've learned from Dave. There are some people who, after a certain amount of time, seem to become more comfortable with the idea of being on the street. And through the time I've spent with Dave and with others, I've tried to understand why that is. And it seems like that at some point, learning that you can get by on a few dollars a day and learning that you can really exist without much, and when you think that getting back on your feet is so far out of reach, at some point it seems like some level of getting used to that sets in, and that becomes your new baseline. And Dave shared with me that, you know what, he sees that in a lot of people on the streets. It's something that many have just come to accept. But for Dave in particular, and for others that I've spoken to, that's something that they fear. I don't want to get to that point where this is just what I accept about my life and about where I am. What strikes me about the time that I've spent with Dave is that his life, one man's life, has impacted me and my family greatly, and everyone who's read the stories on the blog, has echoed a very similar sentiment that it's impacted them. And I believe the other side of that is true as well, that the time that I've been blessed to spend with Dave has impacted him greatly. One seemingly random encounter for 20 or 30 minutes in front of a Target led to hanging out on weekends and sharing his story with literally thousands of people around the world. And so it's just a reminder that those encounters and the time that we spend with others, specifically in this case the people on the street that are in this situation, can have a real and meaningful impact. And I've seen that firsthand, and it's something really beautiful to see.
And it's really our hope that we would see a movement of people here in Costa Mesa and across the county who take seriously the long haul of being in relationship with people, who take seriously what it looks like to truly dive into your community, to truly want to bring about transformation for good, because we've listened to the cries of our neighbors and our friends, and we're walking with them and bringing about change. Again, rather than our ideas of what change might look like and our ideas of what needs to happen.
I then asked Bex, Ian, Larry, and Dr. Clark to summarize their work in a panel interview, which took place at the Rock Harbor offices.
The social fiction that has been created around homeless people is being confronted.
We need research, we need that information.
The church needs to wake up.
Housing.
Mm-hmm.
If we did nothing else, right? If there was only one thing we could do, would be to emphasize permanent housing solutions.
The model can be exported. It is about the church's link to the city, a collaborative effort among organizations, nonprofits who are servicing this population.
The organizations like Mercy House, you guys bring the knowledge. The universities need to bring the research and the education. The church brings the relational component, and the city governments, I think in a lot of ways, they bring permission. The check-in center has made a difference. To have 16 churches working together on one thing.
It's showing other churches that you can be socially relevant and still maintain your faith and still have a thriving church.
The fact that we've gone from being this antagonistic thorn in the side of the city to now where this huge shift in this favor, the churches actually came through.
The flow of people coming to a homeless state won't end.
But we can design a system that immediately gets them housed.
I want to see people in right relationship with God, in right relationship with themselves, in right relationship with others in the world. And that all has to happen as people are going into housing.
As a society, general, secular and Christian alike, we need to believe.
We would, I think, all agree, and we'd all hope and pray that by the grace of God, this type of thing might stimulate more unity in other places around even the same issue and other issues, because it's worth it. It's worth it, and I think in a closing statement I'd say don't let the hardness of it stop you. You know, like, go for it and figure out how to come together and make a difference together.
Before we roll the credits, there's one last thing I think you should know.